Okay, hello. URBS 310 students. And here I am. Now you can see me. Again, Ward Thomas, the professor for your class, Growth and Sustainable Development of Cities. And so wanted to just talk a little bit about what is urban studies and planning. And that will provide, I think, a context for getting into this class. You have the syllabus. You can look at the syllabus and the weekly topics. That will also give you a sense of what we're focusing on in this class. But here I want to talk a little bit about, in general, what is urban studies and planning? I think what the core of what urban and studies and planning is that we study cities. We study small cities, we study large cities, we study the origins of cities, we study the development of cities over time. And of course, if you think about it, cities are complex places. If we think about the cities today, of today in particular, are very complex. Los Angeles has so many kind of elements to it. There's people going to work, there's people driving, there's traffic congestion, there's crowdedness, there's people living in homes. There's all these kind of elements that go into cities that are part of kind of what we study. So that's kind of simple enough. Now, if we take this one step further, really the focus is on the problems of cities, so let's look at Los Angeles. And if we were meeting as a class, I would ask this question to you. And right now you're probably thinking, first thing comes to your mind, I'm imagining for a lot of you, is traffic. We all sit in traffic. Traffic has been a little bit lighter this last year because of COVID, but this is a huge problem facing Los Angeles and cities throughout the United States. People spend a lot of their time sitting in cars. It leads to air pollution, it leads to stress and wasted time, and so on and so forth. So that's a good example of a problem that cities face. But there are other problems too. Housing. Los Angeles has the worst housing crisis in the country right now. And it's a housing crisis that cuts across all kinds of demographic groups. Wealthy, a lot of people who are fairly well off economically are facing a housing crisis, let alone kind of the poor and people with less means. Homelessness is a major problem. Lack of housing leads to a lot of new homelessness. And so that's another problem. We have environmental problems. There are problems associated with crime. There are problems associated with a lack of work. And we could go on and on. So that is the focus of cities. And this is an important point to stress because I've had a couple of students throughout my experience teaching this class, and I've taught it a number of times, who have said in their evaluations that the class was kind of negative in the sense that, we're always talking about problems of the city, and it kind of makes cities sound like, not very appealing places to live. And so there is some truth to that. We focus on, in this class, kind of problems, primarily problems in cities. And in a way, it can get a little depressing. But I mean, there's a purpose to that, is that we want to make cities better places. And if we don't understand and analyze their problems, we're not going to be able to kind of solve them and make them better. So studying the problems lays the basis for exploring ideas for making cities better. So how can we provide more low-income housing for those who need it? What kind of housing should we provide? Do we need to build up? And this is one of the big debates in planning, as well as among, the larger society. Do we need to have higher density housing, high-rise apartment buildings and condominiums and so forth? Or do we continue to kind of build out and build single residential homes for people? What makes the most sense? How do we plan for better transportation systems? So this is really the heart of urban studies and planning. Urban studies and planning is also an interdisciplinary field. And I emphasize this because, cities are very complex. And I think students sometimes coming into the class are looking for a straightforward way of thinking about cities, are looking for some kind of coherence in an academic discipline for studying the city. And that's sometimes hard to do. So, for example, if you take a sociology class, sociology focuses on the social interaction among people and groups and how that influences human behavior. And then there's different kind of ways or paradigms for thinking about social interaction and so on. The same with psychology. Each of these disciplines has a unique way of talking. They have kind of unique concepts and unique methods for studying the issues that they study. Now, urban studies is a little bit of all of that. Urban studies is a little bit of sociology, it's a little bit of psychology, it's a little bit of geography. So oops, there we go. I lost the internet connection, so going to go back to it. Sorry about that. Something I got to get figured out. So going back to this idea of that's an interdisciplinary field. My background is more in sociology. I have another colleague and his background is in economics. Another person, her background is more like in architecture. So we bring these backgrounds to study different aspects of the city. Now, within urban studies and planning, as within other kinds of academic disciplines, there are fields of specialization. So our students get a degree in urban studies and planning, but they also declare a field of specialization. And there's 4 or 5 fields. One of them is environmental planning. And in environmental planning, we deal with the effects of environmental pollution on the city and on human health. Those sources of environmental pollution are in the water, are in the air, and their causes are really unlimited. And environmental problems are huge problems in cities like Los Angeles. So we have here, looking at the screen on the right-hand side, these are the location of big corporations that release toxic chemicals into the environment. And I put this up here because just to give you a flavor of the kind of thing that environmental planners might be interested in. We can actually map out the location of these companies and try to keep track of types of toxic chemicals that are being emitted into the environment. And then we also study the effects that toxic chemicals have on humans. Here's a picture of a little girl, for example. Lead is very damaging to children. It damages their cognitive development and creates all kinds of other problems. And there's, of course, literally thousands of chemicals out there that are emitted into the environment. Another field of specialization is economic development. Economic development deals with primarily how do you create jobs for people in a city, and importantly, how do you create good, sustainable jobs, just jobs that pay a decent wage and jobs that are in industries that don't pollute the environment or harm cities in other ways. So this is a real challenge. Economic development also deals with, trying to do things to help the working poor and the disadvantaged, does things dealing with, helping economies make a shift from focusing on one part of the economy to another. So for example, if you look at the left-hand side of the screen here, you see an abandoned building here, likely some old manufacturing company that probably existed several decades ago and did provide at one time some good jobs, but that kind of industry has died and new industries have emerged. And this is a unique kind of characteristic of capitalism, the kind of constant dying of some industries and the birth of new industries. And that transition can be tough on people. So economic development includes, how you can help people who are making a transition from different industries and a whole host of other things. Another field of specialization is transportation. So if you're someone that's really frustrated with driving in Los Angeles and you'd like to do something about it, this would be a good avenue for you. And there's a lot of really good jobs in the field of transportation planning, working for local governments and other organizations. Some of the things that are being worked on now are, light rail, subways, trains, electric vehicles, creating other modes of transportation that do not pollute the environment. So this is an exciting field here. Another field, and this is the last one I'll focus on, these are the kind of the main fields, is community development. It's similar to economic development in a way, but this has a greater focus on housing and the quality of life that people have where they live. How do you build housing in relation to transportation and jobs and access to supermarkets and food and recreational activities and parks. This kind of is a more holistic kind of field that tries to really integrate people into a livable community. So those are some of the main specializations, and those specializations we will, spend some time in this class. We have 1 week where we focus on environmental issues. We have another week that we do focus on, a couple weeks actually, that we deal with economic development kinds of issues. We have 1 week where we focus on transportation, and we have probably a couple of weeks where we focus on community development issues. So we'll explore these kinds of issues that are at the heart of urban studies and planning in more depth in the class that you're gonna take with me. And then I wanted to conclude here by just talking a little bit about what do planners do, and specifically students who graduate in our department with a degree in urban studies and planning. What do they end up doing? And I got to say, and of course I'm biased, a little bit of bias here, trying to sell you on urban studies and planning as a possible major or minor, if you have not declared one yet. But I'd say our graduates do pretty well. The job market's not that great right now because of all of the chaos associated with COVID and so on. But in general, our students do pretty well. Most of our majors get jobs as planners for local government. So local governments are required to do a lot of planning. They're required by law to do a lot of planning. They're required to have something called a general plan. They need to hire transportation planners, economic development planners, environmental planners, land use planners, planners that work in community development. And there are just, dozens of cities. Just in this area alone, let's see, I'm trying to think what the numbers are. There's several dozen cities that are probably, within driving distance from Cal State Northridge. Let me just, some cities that are around the city. Northridge is actually in the city of Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles is really, really big. But around us, there's the city of Burbank. There's San Fernando is its own separate city. There's the city of Santa Monica. There's Culver City. So there's dozens of cities around us, and all of those cities are required to hire people who are planners. The jobs actually pay fairly well, and the benefits are really pretty good. That's probably even the more positive aspect of the compensation. You get pretty good, healthcare benefits and so on. The jobs can also be very rewarding. They're like anything else. I think there are aspects of a lot of planning jobs that are repetitious and are, some of the planners might look at the clock some days, waiting till 5 o'clock. But overall, the graduates I talk to, they come back and say, I really like the work I'm doing. I like the people I work with. I find the work kind of interesting and fulfilling. I enjoy going to work. So that's a really good sign. That's a really good thing. Now, some of our graduates also get jobs for nonprofit organizations. A nonprofit organization is, well, it's similar in some respects to an individual company doing something, but it's a nonprofit company. And to be a nonprofit company or organization, you have to fill out some paperwork, and you have a different tax status, and you don't operate for a profit the same way regular companies do. You have to have some kind of focus, and typically that focus is serving the community in some way. If we think about we can think about, well, let's see, I'm sorry, I'm trying to, there are literally thousands of nonprofit organizations out there, from small ones, that have 1 or 2 people that work for them, to larger ones. And they provide services from providing, educational support to disadvantaged kids, to providing services to the homeless, and a whole host of other things. So some of our graduates work for nonprofit organizations, and then some of our graduates also continue on to graduate school. There are some of the students, probably the majority, pursue a master's degree in urban planning. There's a number of universities that provide a master's degree. And in fact, master's degree programs in planning are more common than undergraduate degrees in planning. So there's a UCLA, USC, Cal State Northridge. We started the master's program a few years ago in urban planning. Cal Poly Pomona, I think, has a master's in planning. And there's a host of other schools in California and throughout the country. A master's degree in planning really helps you get an edge up later on in the job market. If you get some work experience and you want to move up, a master's degree can really help you. And then finally, some of our graduates do go into the private sector, especially into things like development, real estate, companies that deal with land in one way or another. And there's a host of opportunities in that respect. So I think I'm going to just stop right there. It was kind of a relatively brief overview, but hopefully that gives you kind of a context for what we're going to be doing in this class. So again, we will, next week, I think we'll get a little bit more momentum going for the class. I'll post a lecture by Monday, and you will have a couple of other assignments on Canvas. Keep a close eye on Canvas. We'll have our first quiz next week, so you want to be ready for that. Try to do the reading and so on. I'll send out some emails to remind you where we are and what we're doing. And again, feel free to email me if you have any questions about anything. Okay, so we will talk to you later.